I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can tell you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death.
Welcome to Snape Chat, the voice of the Snapedom, the podcast where we discuss all things Snape, always. Join us as we dive into the world of the bravest man we ever knew in art, fanfic, meta, and more. Obviously. This is Snape-centric with episode 42, and I will be speaking with MrVillain, also known as Viren. She's a wonderfully talented artist, author, and podficker, and she created War Prize, an amazing and dark Severitis comic. We've set up an extras page of her work so you can follow along with the discussion at snapechatpodcast.com. Enjoy the show. This is Snape-centric, and I'm here with MrVillain.
Hi.
Also known as Viren. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Viren or Viren. Any way you want to pronounce it is fine with me. I pronounce it Viren, though.
Okay. Author, artist, comic creator, podficker. Just another very talented person who has some interesting things to say. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I guess to start off, I'm 32. I live in Canada, and I work for a marketing agency as a multimedia artist, which probably explains why I do so many different things within fandom. Like you mentioned earlier, like podficking, drawing, writing, a bit of all of it.
All right.
I'm always doing random new hobbies because I enjoy change and challenge, which makes me sound competitive, but I'm the least competitive person ever. I'm quite happy to lose as long as I just get to try something new and, like, I don't know, challenge myself.
Oh, that's great. Now, you've done creations in a number of fandoms. Can you tell us a little bit about them and when you started creating?
Yeah, so I have been a fangirl all my life, honestly. Uh, when I was 11 years old, I think I got a handy cam, and me and my friends used to film Harry Potter videos in,
Uh,
in our basements. And then soon after that, I think when I was 13, I discovered fan fiction, and, I was just lost after that moment. Like, it was so amazing.
oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I was a bit of an anime kid, so I was really into, like, anime fandom, so, Fruits Basket, Fullmetal Alchemist, Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, Inuyasha, like, all of it, all the way through high school. So, yeah, I've done quite and throughout the entire time, I used to, like, make silly flash animations, make fan videos, write crack fic, and I don't know, just all types of zany things. And then after high school, I kinda took a break from fandom because I wanted to concentrate on university and my career, but when I was done university and I moved back home, you kind of I feel like everyone goes through this where you just become very depressed because you realize you have to become an adult, and so I kind of gravitated back to fandom, and then I got really into, like, Sherlock, Hannibal, DC Comics, and Boku no Hero, and now I've circled back to Harry Potter again. So, yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you did because you've really got some great creations.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So you've long been a fan of the Harry Potter books. How did you come to get back into the Harry Potter fandom?
Yeah, so I think like many people during the great panini, AKA pandemic, you end up quarantine or in isolation and needing something that's like comfort. So over I think Christmas of 2022, I got COVID, so I was home alone and not allowed to see anyone over the holidays and was very sad.
Oh, oh,
So I binge watched the Harry Potter movies and it was like just I don't know, it made me so happy all over again. And I forgot that I was alone. And yeah, I quickly became obsessed all over again. So after I watched the movies, I was like, "You know what? I haven't reread these books since the last book had come out." So I went back and reread them all, and I don't know, like, it was just such I forgot how fun the universe was, and, like, I don't know, there's just so much to it. And so after I finished the books, I kind of forgot that at the end of the books, when you find out Snape's story and that he was, actually in love with Lily the whole time, you don't really have time to process that. And then, because then the books suddenly end, and then you're, like, left with nothing, and it leaves you feeling so empty.
Mhm.
So, right after I read the books, I was like, "I need fan fiction, like, I gotta fix this." So, I went to find some Snape x Lily fanfics because I just wanted to see him happy. And then from there, I just went down the fanfic rabbit hole, and here I am.
Alright. You've created illustrations for several authors like Orisha, Dan Puff, and M
Oh, Metallomagnetic.
Metallomagnetic, yes. So how did these come about?
So I kind of love telling the story because it's a little inspirational, I suppose. When I first got into Harry Potter fandom, I didn't even know that the fandom was, like, still running strong. Like, I had maybe 5 followers on Tumblr, and I had no friends. So, a friend of mine had told me to read one of Arisha's fics, and I was blown away. Like, obviously, she's incredible. So I read this fic, and it really inspired me to draw a picture. So I drew this picture, and I remember when I drew it, I was like, "This is so bad. This is the ugliest drawing ever. I'm so embarrassed." And I was actually gonna delete it, but then I was like, "You know what? Nobody follows me on Tumblr anyways. Like, I'll just post it, and I can use it for myself as just a reference because I like to see my own art growth."
Mhm.
So I posted it. I didn't tag it at all. Like, I didn't share it with anyone. And then a week later, Arisha actually messaged me, and she had found it, I guess, because someone had sent it to her, and she was like, "Oh my god, I love this drawing so much. Can I please include it in my fic? And on top of that, can I please commission you to draw the last chapter of Ab Extra?" Which was, my it's still my all-time favorite fan fiction, and I was like, "What do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? This picture is so bad, blah, blah, blah." But no, she really loved it, and, like, then I started to see, like, "Oh, maybe this drawing isn't that bad. Maybe I'm better than I thought." So I just like to tell this story because I just wanted to encourage people who draw, like, even if you can't see the beauty in your own art, someone out there can. Like, to someone else, it's going to be important, so post it, don't hold back. You never know what's gonna happen. And, like, after that, I've now been drawing so many fan works within Harry Potter and, like, posting a lot of fan art, so I know it's been really rewarding, and it's made me really happy.
That's really great. Yeah, I have to second I don't know, I really love Snape artists. I love everybody in the Snapedom, but,
Mhm.
artists I have a special spot for, I guess.
Why is that? Just like oh
Oh, maybe my dad was an artist, so
oh, amazing.
yeah.
Do you draw any art, or have you?
I scribble a little bit, but
Post it.
it's more abstract than, you know,
Mm, awesome.
but yeah. Oh, and then you actually collaborated with Risha on Riddle of the Midnight Sky. What was that like?
So, it was kind of funny because when Arisha reached out to me about potentially doing a collaboration for the story she had been writing for a year, if not longer, I had actually just finished writing the script for My Comic War Prize, and I was, like, really pumped up, and I was, like, ready to post, and I was like, nothing was gonna stop me, and literally nothing could stop me except for Arisha. Like, she is the only other
Oh,
person who would make me drop War Prize to, like, work on one of her stories. So I was like, "Well, I can't say no." Yeah, so I said yes, and the process was quite straightforward. So she would give me a chapter about a week in advance before she was going to post it on AO3. So I would read it before anyone else and then sketch it, get her to approve the sketch, and then just try to knock it out in a couple days. And for the most part, she gave me quite a lot of freedom. She was like, "Yeah, whatever scene you like, just pick it and we can draw it." There was only a couple scenes where she was really adamant about, like, what she wanted in that chapter because I think it was just really important to the plot or very significant to her. There was one chapter in particular where because it's mostly a Harry Voldemort story, but, obviously there's Snary in it, and there's a scene where Harry and Snape finally, have sex.
Uh-huh.
But within that same chapter was a very emotional scene between Harry and Voldemort, where, like, Voldemort, I guess, cries and Harry is consoling him or something like that, and Arisha really wanted that scene drawn, but she was, like, not sure about it because obviously this, sex scene happened as well, and she was like, "Should we draw that one?" And I said to her, I was like, "Listen, as a reader, you cannot like, I would be so mad if you made me go through all these chapters of pain and angst and then not reward me with a bit of sex." So I was like, "You have to let me draw that scene." And so she's like, "You know what? You're right. Like, we have to do it." So, but I ended up drawing both scenes for that chapter because I think both scenes were quite important. So that was pretty fun. Mhm.
Yeah. You also did an excellent podfic of Contempt, the amazing fic by Dan Puff. Was working in a different medium something you'd like to do again?
Absolutely. I also really wanna try animating some drawings as well, but I have a very special place in my heart for podfics because as an artist, I love to listen to podfics while I work
Oh,
and audiobooks as well. So I listen to all of them, and I don't know, like, I think it's a really undervalued thing in fandom, especially because it makes it accessible to, like, different types of people, especially if you like vision impairment, things like that.
right.
Yeah, and honestly, I would have recorded more podfics by now because I did enjoy the process of podficking, but I'm currently renovating my home, so it's very loud and I don't have an office, but as soon as that's finished, I will be podficking more, and even just, like, the act of building character voices is quite fun. Like, I wanna do Voldemort, like, his voice, I think it would be such a challenge, but really fun to try to do, so, yeah, I'm looking forward to more of that.
Huh, neat. Your own fics and comics could be considered rather dark or heavy. What appeals to you about the darker themes?
So, this is a really great question, and I have to think about this quite a lot because I've never had to, like, explain this before. So I think ultimately I'm really drawn to stories about character growth, and I find the biggest growth happens when characters have the hardest decisions. So, what I really love about stories with dark themes is that often characters are forced into impossible situations and have to struggle with really complicated emotions. So, like, yes, I'm a not safe for work artist, but like the act of sex itself isn't interesting to me. What's interesting is the tension building up to it and then the aftermath of it, because those feelings are just so hard to articulate. So I really like to try to draw them to articulate it. And I think you can see that in my artwork because I'm always trying to capture two conflicting emotions on a character's face. So sometimes it's like arousal and
Ah,
disgust, or guilt and desire, or like even anger and betrayal.
mhm.
Yeah, and Snape is just obviously such an excellent character to practice that with because he carries probably the most baggage in that entire franchise.
True.
Yeah, and, you never truly know what he's thinking, so he's just such a great canvas to play around with for that reason.
Well, that's fun. In your stories, Harry seems to suffer a lot of trauma, particularly at the hands of Voldemort. Are they your OTP?
So I feel like I'm gonna disappoint some of my fans because I draw them quite a lot, but no, they are not my OTP. They make an absolutely terrible couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see them ever being happy together, and in fact, when I read Harry Mort fics, because I do read them and, like, I do enjoy the ship, but I always want Harry to, like, kill Voldemort or, like, leave him, you know what I mean? Like, grow better than him or whatever, which kinda ties in back to why I like darker themes because, like, I want Harry to stand up for himself and leave this toxic relationship, and, like, for me, that is a happy ending in a story, which I know some people really want a story that has 2 characters having happily ever after, but I don't know, I don't think happily ever afters are necessarily realistic. It's not what I look for in a story. I just think that, life goes on and it's all about growing for yourself and just learning lessons and continuing the journey. So in terms of my OTP, Well, I am a multi-shipper, so I'm not sure if I have one, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
I probably read Drarry the most, but it's hard for me to say that Drarry is my OTP. And funnily enough, like, my favorite character is Gilderoy Lockhart. So,
Oh,
like, yeah, so none of this makes sense. Yeah.
that's all right. Yeah. Terry's trauma leads to him becoming empowered, would you say?
Yeah, I think so.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and
Maybe not directly.
yeah, a lot of us in our lives go through traumatic experiences and really hard times,
Mhm.
and, it's just kind of the cards that we're dealt with. So I find it really empowering stories about people who conquer these parts of their lives and, like, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Snape first appears in your work as a supporting player, but then becomes the main character in War Prize, your most recent comic. What inspired this story, and what aspects of Snape are you exploring?
So I'm really excited to answer this question because it was actually one of your podcast episodes that inspired the entire plot of War Prize.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I'm a fan of your show. Like I absolutely love it.
Oh, thank
So
you.
and of course it was the episode with Arisha
Uh-huh.
because I already outed myself as an Arisha super fan. But yeah, she said it really offhandedly, but she said that if there had been no prophecy, Snape would have remained a Death Eater. And like I had never considered that before. It's so simple, but it's really quite shocking. And it really changed my opinion of Snape's character actually for the worse. Like, I do think over the course of Harry's life and the Harry Potter books, Snape did have a change of heart,
Mhm,
but I'm, like, also tempted to believe that without Lily's death as a catalyst, like, Snape would have done some really evil things.
mhm.
So, yeah, the creation of War Prize was really me seeking an answer to that question and wondering, like, can Death Eater Snape still be redeemed?
Oh, that's great. Okay. Yeah, let's talk a little more about War Prize. It's absolutely gorgeous, in part because of the layout, which is really suited to being scrolled on a phone or tablet. Was it hard to create this way rather than in the traditional comic book layout?
Mhm. So, I'm a really big fan of comic books. I'm a bit of a collector, and I've been reading them my entire life. So, when I started to plan War Prize, I did wanna go the traditional comic book route just because I wanted to print it and bind it into a book and then be able to sell hard copies as well as a digital release. Just 'cause it's like, I love having it on my shelf kinda thing.
Mhm,
And I did do this with another fandom I was in, which was Boku no Hero, where I created a fan comic, you know, bound it myself into a zine and sold it, and people loved it, right? Like, people were really, really excited to receive that in the mail, and I did wanna do that for this as well, but I struggled because for a couple reasons. So, 1, AO3 is not really meant for image hosting, and it would be kind of a headache to format, and 2, most people, in my opinion, probably use their phones to read AO3, and it's kind of hard to read a comic page on your phone. It's too small of a screen. I know I struggle with it. Again, like, visual impairment reasons, it's a little bit hard. I don't have the best vision myself, and I didn't like that. So, a webtoon format with, like, the endless scroll has become really popular, and I've started reading comics in that format, so
oh,
yeah, and at first, I was a little bit resistant to it because, again, I like the traditional format, but I was like, "You know what? This is a good opportunity to experiment to see if I actually like that endless scroll format and if I can work within it." So, I was like, "Okay, let's give it a shot." And you know what? I absolutely love it. I find it so much easier to create this way. Like, just being able to pace the comic, add breaths, add, spaces, and it just helped me build tension, basically, which has been a lot of fun. And on top of that, if I had gone the traditional comic book route, I would have drawn the entire comic in one sitting and then not in one sitting. I would have drawn the entire comic before before releasing it. So, but the way I'm doing it now is I release a chapter at a time. And I was really surprised by how invaluable the comment feedback has been to my writing process. Because obviously there's a bit of a mystery going on here. There's a couple like plot lines, and as the writer, I know what's going on, but the readers have no idea. And so sometimes the comments have questions or they have ideas or they're just like, well, why is this character doing that? Or you know what I mean? And for me, I was like, oh, I didn't even consider that. And there's definitely been a few times where I wrote a bit of a plot hole and a reader has pointed out being like, "Oh my god, like something's gonna happen." And I was like, "Oh
Oh.
no, nothing's gonna happen." So so in the next chapter, I just wrote in a couple extra words to like fill in that plot hole so then people wouldn't get mad at me,
Mhm.
which is it's been really, really fun. Yeah, and it's really fun seeing like people in the comments try to guess what's happening, especially because there are so many plot lines happening at the same time. Like it's not just like Snape and Harry.
Right.
Like we have Regulus's plot, we have Lily's plot, we have Voldemort's plot. You know what I mean? And you know, even Lucius Malfoy has a plot, and no one's
Oh, yes.
story is going nowhere. Like it's all going somewhere. But I will say, like, there are a couple plots where they don't necessarily tie into the end of the story, but most of them do. The only plot that is maybe a little inconsequential to the ending is Gilderoy Lockhart's plot, which is
Oh.
there if you didn't. If
Yeah,
you
I've noticed.
I'm so glad people noticed that. So, yeah, so Gilderoy Lockhart is definitely in my story. Like I said, he's my favorite character, so I had to include
Uh-huh.
him. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Oh, great. Yeah, the feedback, and I noticed in your last author's note for chapter 9 that you're apologizing in advance for chapter 10.
Yes, oh my god. I didn't foresee how angry and anxious that would make people.
Oh.
It what kills me about it is, like yeah, so at the very end, I say, like, "Apologies for the next chapter, LOL." But the next chapter isn't even the worst chapter in the story.
Oh, okay.
So, I probably just shouldn't have said anything.
Oh,
It's more like there's a specific type of fan who I think is going to be upset, but other types of fan won't be upset. And it's also really funny because I get this question a lot of like, is it a happy ending? And I don't know how to answer that question because, people's idea of a happy ending is so different.
oh, that's true.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, like for me, a happy ending is when a character overcomes trauma. Like it doesn't mean they end up
Mhm.
with another character, right? Like
Right.
so I don't know how to answer the question. Like in many ways, I probably shouldn't even talk about the ending. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to spoil it,
Okay.
but
All right.
yeah, I will just tell people read the tags. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I don't feel like a happy ending should be a guaranteed thing.
I agree. I agree. I For me, the best endings are hard endings, which again, it doesn't mean happy or sad. It just means like maybe a hard lesson was learned. Like just character growth basically. As long as you have character growth, I think that's a good ending.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that also helps when you read work in progress that
Mhm.
maybe doesn't get updated for a very long time.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's like, well, if this ends here, I can live with it.
Absolutely.
Where they're at that time. I don't know. It's a weird way of looking at it, I guess.
I agree. It almost helps yourself grow as a person.
Oh,
Right?
true.
Yeah, like becoming okay with things the way they are.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Right.
I yeah,
It's kind of the opposite of people saying, "Write faster."
I know. Like, funny enough, I love long fics. I rarely read one shots, but I also rarely finish the fics that I read because once I get to the point where like that character has done the growing that I expected them to do within the fic, I'm like, okay, I'm satisfied, I'm out. So yeah, I often don't read the final chapter. Like sometimes I do, like it really depends on the writer, but if it's just
Mhm.
excessive fluff and, feel good stuff, which is great. Like some people definitely need that. I'm happy it exists, but I'm personally like, "Okay, like, I'm satisfied, though. I don't need this."
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
For War Prize, did you have the whole story kind of blocked out as far as chapters go, or
Yeah, I did. I wrote the entire script just because I didn't wanna write myself into a hole again. 'Cause when you write a whole story, it's easy to kind of go back. I don't wanna say easy, but it's easier to go back and change something, but if you've already drawn it, you can't really change the drawing. It's a little bit difficult. So I wrote the whole story, I divided it into chapters, and then I started posting it. I did make some changes along the way as I was posting, just, based on sometimes on reader feedback, or as I was drawing it, in formatting it, I realized, like, this could use more dialogue here. There was even some parts where, I don't know, I realized that I could add some more background world building, like adding things into the background that might come in play later, or stuff like just like little details. Because sometimes the story is told in the little details. So, yeah, so that stuff was added last minute.
the newspaper headlines or
Yeah, yeah, and I know there was some stuff that my beta was like, "Wait, this wasn't in the story when I read it," so which is fun. I like to keep everyone on their toes.
oh,
So
that's great. Okay, let's, take a look at some of your work and discuss them. Here we have Snape holding Harry at one point, and James is pleading for him to leave him alone.
Mhm. So this picture, which people might recognize as like a scene from my comic War Prize, this is the origin of War Prize. Like right after I had listened to that Arisha interview with you, it inspired me to just draw this panel. And so I did that. And it really was just these two panels. Like there was no bigger story here. But I threw it online and then I was like thinking about it for a couple days and I was like, no, wait, like this is actually pretty interesting. So then I added a second part just to finish off the story. But then when I added that, I was like, wait, no, there's more here. So then I kept adding on parts. But this point, I didn't have a story. Like I didn't know where this was going. I was kind of just whatever popped into my head, I was throwing out there. And I think I had drawn 6 parts in total. And then I realized, like, okay, no, like, this is clearly something, like, there's a story here, I've gotta figure this out. So I went on a long bike ride, which is how I do most of my
Oh,
thinking,
neat.
trying to figure out, like, what I could do with this, how I was gonna bring this all together, and suddenly the ending struck me, and it was like, "Oh my god, like, that is a perfect ending." But I realized that to get to that ending, I had actually ridden myself into a hole with something I had posted in one of the parts. I can't remember which part it was, it might have been, like, 3 or 4 or something like that, and I was like, "Okay, I have to rewrite that in order to achieve this ending." And that was kind of how I started to, like, write the script for War Prize, and I started to realize, "Okay, I'm gonna have to redraw this, rewrite this, and, hopefully make a story out of this." So, yeah,
And you went from basically colored illustrations to a black and white theme with pops of color.
I did, and you know what? It was really my experience working with Arisha that made me do that, because she wanted her drawings in black and white, which is something I never did before, but I totally fell in love with the style she wanted, and I was like, "You know what? It's also faster for me to draw, it's less stressful, so, like, let's try this." And, yeah, so I've been doing it with that method ever since, and I don't know, I'm liking it, I feel like it works.
It does.
Thank you.
Oh. Okay, now we're looking at one that Snape and Lily are looking at each other. Lily is heavily pregnant and she has roses.
Yeah, so this drawing was, again, I thought came into my head of, you know, the because there's some lost years in there where we don't see between, like, the end of when Lily and Snape were at Hogwarts to, like, when Harry is born, and we kind of vaguely know what's happening to both characters, but there's a lot of changes that happen, right? Because, we don't see Snape become a Death Eater. We just know that he does become one, and so I figured, like, him seeing Lily pregnant would probably break his heart, and drive him further into darkness. And I really wanted to like try to capture that moment of this break between them and like the betrayal. And so I drew this. And what's interesting about this is I often circle back to old things that I've thought about or created and bring them into new work. So this particular picture I drew ended up influencing the plot of War Prize,
Okay.
which we will see further down the line maybe if it's not already obvious, but yeah.
Yeah, it just Snape's his fist is clenched and you can't see his face except in profile, but
Yeah.
just looks very rigid.
Mhm. I think he's trying to pretend to hate her in this moment, and when Snape is dealing with difficult emotions, he kinda shuts down and just goes really rigid, I feel like.
Yeah. The next one is oh, this is a neat scene of Harry and Snape walking in the rain.
Mhm. Yeah, so this is my first Severitis drawing, and I think I drew this when I first came across the term Severitis, and I was like, "Oh, like, that is a interesting concept, like, what does that look like?" So I just doodled that, and then again, like, this was another early inspiration for the plot with War Prize, where in the most recent chapter, there is a scene where Snape is holding Harry, like 6-year-old Harry's hand, and like they're walking down the street. And it's really a turning point for Snape's character in many ways. So yeah, so again, like this is just early work of mine coming back into more recent work because I just work myself into circles, basically.
Well, that's great. It's kind of a synthesis.
hmm
The next one is called Begging, and basically Snape is on his knees pleading with Voldemort.
Yeah, so I think I was when I reread the books, I was really struck by the scene where you don't even see it, but it's just mentioned. I think it's Snape mentions to Dumbledore that he begged Voldemort to spare Lily's life, and Voldemort said yes. And like I guess because people forget that, especially early Voldemort, his followers loved him, and he always tries to reward them, and and that's how you build followers, right? Like,
Mhm,
and so yeah, and I just found that scene to be very striking, and I always wondered what that would look like because, his followers probably at that stage, like, loved him,
mhm.
right? Like, I don't think they feared him. I think they respected his power, but I don't think they were scared of him. Well, or maybe they were, what do I know? I don't know. But again, so it was just, like, a scene that I think was, like, would be really interesting to see how that played out, so I kinda wanted to see what that would look like, and so I tried to come up with it, and this is what I came up with.
You have a very interesting way of drawing Snape
Mhm.
with very stringy hair that I just love.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It's almost like a happy accident because when I draw, I try to just play to my strengths, and I'm very heavy-handed with my blacks and, like, my lines, like, I really enjoy thick lines. Uh, Snape's hair, it's hard because in the books, it's described as greasy,
Mhm.
which it's not the sexiest description.
No.
So no, so I try to come up with, like, a happy medium where it, like, implies that it's a little bit lank and greasy without that, like, that shine. So
Mhm.
but yeah, I think it's really just my natural way of drawing thick lines that really leans to it, and it was a happy accident. It just happens that my style kinda created that, and I quite like it too. I'm pretty proud of it. So thank you for pointing that out.
Oh, yeah. And then is Snape as a student in the library with a couple of his Slytherin pals,
Mhm.
looking at books, or pretending to sleep or not pretending to sleep.
Yeah, I think I had titled this drawing something like or maybe given it a caption of Snape showing his friends some cool dark arts things that he found. And it's supposed to be a little bit cracky because
Mhm.
obviously, like, Hogwarts era Snape was just obsessed with the dark arts and, James used to make fun of him for it and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, and so I figured, like, this nerd is just obsessing over, dark arts and stuff like that. And so, he's a little bit socially awkward and doesn't quite know how to bond with people. So he shows them his hobby and, everyone else is just so boring.
Mhm.
So in the drawing, like Lucius and Regulus are literally falling asleep at the library, like, oh my God, will this kid shut up?
Oh,
Um,
that's
but
great.
yeah, I really enjoy, especially like Hogwarts era Lucius, I think is just the concept is hilarious to me. Like, I would love to see more fan art of that and like fan fiction about that because
True.
he's got to be like such a douchebag. So,
Oh, yeah.
mhm. And again, it's really funny because like I could be wrong, but I think it was Lucius who introduced Snape to Voldemort or recommended him. I That might be fan lore. That might not actually be true, but
Yeah, I think it's fan lore that
oh,
you
okay.
you assume that Lucius was a very influential person, especially for Snape.
Mm. So, I guess, yeah, it's interesting because for me, like, Lucius and Snape are just such different types of people that if they weren't in the same house, they would probably hate each other or, like, maybe Snape wouldn't hate Lucius, but, like, I feel like Snape would probably Lucius would really look down on Snape.
Mhm,
And the fact that they're in the same house is, like, the only thing that kind of binds them. Like, I don't see them as friends or getting along or anything like that, so
mhm.
I try to imagine ways that they would be friends or they would get into each other's good graces or things like that. They're an odd couple.
Yes.
Mhm, but it is fun to explore.
Yeah. Alright, and, oh, this last one is "You're home now," and
Mm,
Snape is kneeling there, getting his dark mark put on him by Voldemort.
yes, yeah. Again, this was me just really fascinated by the missing years between when Snape ended Hogwarts and became a Death Eater. And, like, in the drawing, I feel I really tried to capture a couple emotions here. Like, one is, like, anticipation in Snape's face, like, he's really happy, but also it's a pretty, like, scary and intense thing, like, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that mark, and then, obviously, Voldemort is looming over him, looking a
Yeah.
little bit, smirking a little bit, being like, "Ah, if only you knew." But yeah, yeah, I'm just really fascinated by the early days of Snape becoming a Death Eater. It's just really interesting to me.
I really like how you used the light in this picture.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of a green light, and but his arm is, like, white hot.
Mhm.
I don't hot or freezing, I don't know, but it looks really painful.
Yeah, I think white hot is a perfect way to describe it, honestly, like, that is what I was trying to achieve, so I'm glad that reads.
Yeah, and we will have a page on our website at snapechatpodcast.com with these works that you can come and see for yourself, and let's see, we'll also have links to stories and podfic and all sorts of cool stuff,
Mhm,
especially the War Price comic. That is something I highly recommend.
mhm. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Mhm.
Uh-huh. So where can we find you online?
Yeah, so I post all my HP stuff to Tumblr, which is my Tumblr is MrVillain, and I am on Twitter as Viren_villain, and also my longer format works are on AO3 as MrVillain. So, yeah, you can just find I think, like you said, there will be links that you can find me there. I'm not anywhere else currently. I think I'm trying to be on more platforms, but it is overwhelming sometimes to be on so many platforms.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Mhm. So I'm gonna just stick to those 3 for now, and yeah, if I'm ever anywhere else, I'll make a post about it.
Sounds good. Do you take commissions or self prints or such?
Yeah, so unfortunately, no, I do not take commissions, or like very, very rarely do I take commissions. It's and when I do, it's usually for something that I personally really want to draw. I used to have an online store and I would sell prints, but ever since the pandemic, I shut that down for a couple reasons, but I haven't had the chance to, like, open it up again because life is so busy. So, who's got time?
That must be very
Mhm.
labor intensive to have something like that. Yeah.
It is a lot of work. It's a second job, basically, and yeah, I don't have the capacity right now. In the future, I would love to. I have considered reformatting my comic to sell as a hard copy in the future, but I'm not 100% sure that I will, but if I do, I will be sure to mention that somewhere online. I don't know
All
where yet,
right. Yeah.
but we'll see. Yeah.
Uh, I'd be lined up for it.
Ooh, well, in that case. Yeah. Mhm.
Uh, okay. The last question. What are your future plans for Snape?
So I have I guess a couple plans, maybe. I really enjoy the Snape and Lily dynamic, and I feel like there's actually not a lot of content about it, or maybe I'm just not looking in the right places. So I was throwing around the idea of a time travel Snape fic where, you know, he ends up back in time and then he realizes he has the chance to save Lily again. But with that decision, he realizes that if he saves Lily, then Harry never receives the power to defeat Voldemort,
Oh,
and so he has to make that so he has to kinda make that choice, which I'm so mean to Snape. I always give him really impossible decisions, but I just think it'd be really interesting to explore that.
okay.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe a couple more not safe for work things. We will see. But yeah, I'm not done torturing him yet.
We love those too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Mr. Villain or Byron,
Mhm.
thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a blast. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Okay, take
Okay.
care.
You too. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed our chat as much as I did. Thanks again to Mr. Villain for speaking with me. You really need to check out her work. Go to snapechatpodcast.com for images and links to her amazing comic War Prize and more. And here we must say goodbye. We wish you didn't have to, but it hasn't escaped our notice that life isn't there. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Tumblr and X, leave a comment on our website at snapechatpodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Many thanks to Nix for her continued work on our website. Support us on Coffee to help defray the cost of production. That's ko-fi.com. Donate $10 or more and we'll send you some nifty Snape Chat stickers anywhere in the world. Be sure to check out Care Magical Shippers podcast and alwayssnape.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay snarky.